Before we move on and take a look at the routing configuration, I want to go back and talk about connectivity here. Basic connectivity tests. We have just saw how to test connectivity from the command line with the interfaces being up and configured. But the problem is that if you were to try to test connectivity and not directly from the firewall, but from the devices around the firewall, trying to ping the firewall and not vice versa, you would see a problem related to the default implicit behavior of a PAN OS. So we saw that the firewall is able to ping the locally connected devices, but what about if I were to connect to router 1 and try to ping the firewall? We see that in this case, the result of the test is failed. What I'm trying to say here is that if you were to use those devices to test connectivity after configuring interfaces of the firewall, you could run into an impression that there is something wrong with the configuration because the firewall does not reply. It seems that connectivity is broken, which is not necessarily the case. So what's the problem here? The default behavior of the firewall is that it is going to block all management communication destined to its data interfaces unless you assign a special component that is known as a network profile, which is where you will tell the firewall what type of services, management traffic, you want a given interface to accept. So we can control HTTP, HTTPS access, SSH, Telnet, SNMP, and also ping. Now, once we create a network profile from network profiles, we will want to assign it to an interface to start working. So let's go ahead and take a look at this. I'm going to go to network, down to network profiles, choose interface MGMT, where we will configure a profile for our data ports. I'm going to call it data ports profile, where I'm going to accept ping as a service that I want to process on those interfaces. Now also notice that you've got a section called permitted IP addresses. You could be more specific in terms of what devices will be able to connect to the interface with these management services and protocols. You would just have to put the addresses of allowed or just trusted stations to this list over here. But we will just configure a ping as one of the allowed, the only allowed management service. And now in order to make it work, we will have to go back to interfaces and reconfigure them, assign them this profile, which can be done from the Advanced tab, Advanced, Management Profile, select the Data Ports Profile, so the profile that we have just defined, and let's do it for both interfaces. You may only want to use it for the inside, so the trusted devices can detect the firewall, but in my case, I will do this on both sides of the network, trusted and untrusted. I'm using a single profile for both of these. Just don't forget that for the changes to take effect, we need to commit them. And when this configuration becomes active, the firewall starts using it, we should be able to establish connectivity, reach the firewall interface even from the locally connected devices. Okay, so we see that the firewall's configuration had to be installed because we now have connectivity.